So, but David Barbee is the managing director and head of business development, capital, and advisory solutions at JP Morgan. He leads a national team of experts to guide corporate clients on succession planning, offer insights into private capital solutions to facilitate growth and ownership transition, and provide tailored access to JP Morgan's leading relationship network with private equity and other capital sources. He's also Southern, just like me. And he loves meeting entrepreneurs, just like you. So be sure to make sure you introduce yourself to David either right now or afterwards at the after party hosted by JP Morgan. But without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to David.
Can you all hear me? Yeah. All right, great. It's great to be in the room with everyone and really excited to be at the very first in-person equity summit. So I'm going to ask Kelly, Ben, and Beatrice to join me on the stage. I think we're in for a real treat. Spent some time with these three earlier this week, and I think they're going to have some great perspectives to share. So maybe where we'll start, Kelly, Ben, Beatrice, just take a moment, introduce yourselves, and maybe tell us what inspired you to pursue your current roles. So Kelly, why don't we start with you?
Hi, everyone. Very excited to be here. Kelly O'Connell, she, her, and I'm the managing partner of 360 Venture Collective. I'm a firstborn daughter, a first-generation single mom, and success was the only option. So early in my career, I was in mergers and acquisitions. I saw what I like to say is the dark side of where founders' dreams go, and I was part of that. I helped make a lot of companies a lot of money. And then I went on and was an executive for one of the largest professional services firms, or continued to help make a lot of companies money. And what inspired me was trying to find a way to bridge my desire for personal success with my innate desire for community and purpose action. So I got my master's in public policy and nonprofit and became a founder alongside bootstrapping an innovation consulting firm, and really started to see the opportunity for historically underestimated founders and bringing their dreams to market. And that's what brought me to 360.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Stokes, or good day for the last guy, seeing I'm an Aussie. How is everyone today? I guess like the reason why I started so I'm the founding partner, sorry, I probably should say who I am. I'm the founding partner of Chasing Rainbows, which is an early stage venture fund which invests in LGBTQ+ founded companies. I really struggle with identity. So I'm adopted, so my parents are white. So I never really fitted in anywhere as a kid growing up. And then like even when I went to Sri Lanka, I didn't fit in there either, which is kind of odd. But also on top of that, obviously being part of the LGBTQ+ community was a real struggle for me. And so I think about why I started the fund, because I don't fit anywhere else. And unfortunately, a lot of us who are in this room also don't fit anywhere else either, because in terms of venture and venture capital, less than 0.5% of all funding goes to someone who identifies as part of the LGBTQ+ community. And so in order to stop that and change that, and in order to give each of us an opportunity to show ourselves and the incredible talent that we have within our community, somebody had to start a fund that did that. So that's what I did.
Hello, I am Beatrice Stonebanks, she, her, sir. I am a queer bisexual leather leader in the San Francisco Bay Area. I have a sordid history. A bit of financial background, stockbroker in New York for a while, and then media and publishing also in New York, although a little bit across the country. And then most recently, the last 10 years, I'm 62, I'm an older woman, playing in AI, tech, cybersecurity, always dabbling with startups. I'm a Forex founder. And I have made male-dominated sectors a lot of money and got tired of it. So I give back to my peeps, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm a mentor and I'm a volunteer, and I love Start Out. Hello.
So I told you we're in for a treat. So thanks the three of you for introducing yourselves. So before we dive in, just want to acknowledge all the statistics that we've heard here in the room already today, right? Obviously, there are unique challenges that our community faces, especially when we're out, raising capital to grow and scale our businesses. So it's super important that we continue the fight to create a more equitable economy for our community. But I would say, Beatrice, Ben, Kelly, I think in our conversation today, would love to talk about how these entrepreneurs can overcome those obstacles and push through to scale and grow their businesses. So appreciate your time today. Ben and Kelly, let's start with you. So you're both active with impact investing and obvious leaders in the space for our community. So we know you've got our back, but give us your unfiltered view here. What are a few of the key things you look for in a startup when making an investment decision? And importantly, maybe the most common pitfall you see.
Thank you for that. I'm going to chime in first, and I know Ben will add to this because we collaborate quite a lot. So 360 Venture Collective writes early stage funding, pre-seed and seed. So we're not looking at market traction indicators. We're looking at market potential indicators. And for us, that means really being able to differentiate yourself as a founding team as uniquely positioned and connected to the problem that you're solving, first and foremost. So really being able to look at us and say, this is why we're solving. My passion for it is so consistent that I will do all of the flexing stages necessary to scale this to the total attainable market necessary for this to be a smart investment. And that's really the first step that's critically important. The second piece is really understanding what that attainable market is and being able to articulate it. It's not just saying this is the market opportunity, but it's truly being able to demonstrate the competitive opportunity and an understanding of the landscape that exceeds what I know as a VC. I don't expect to be the expert in the space. I want the founder in front of me to be the most knowledgeable person in their sector, and being able to articulate that in a way that makes sense to me is the second most important factor. And then the third piece is being able to have a market-based business plan. So really being able to say, here is the business model that is worth investing in. And so really looking at us and saying, I will gain traction and I will figure out how to take the dollars that are being invested and turn them in to a multiplied factor in return. And I'll do that with my leadership ability. And so the final element I'll say is the person sitting across from me has to make me go, I would want to work for them. And that's the kind of unspoken piece that I think is really important to articulate.
I love that. I might start asking that question from now on to myself. So I think for me, like obviously, people within our community often have to work twice as hard for half the respect. But what that means is that they go twice as far when given the opportunity. And so I often think about that and think, well, who is this person? What is their background? And again, what Kelly mentioned before about their lived experience is so crucial as well, because it shows you that how committed someone is as well. Because when you have a shitty day, you've got to go back again tomorrow, and so there's no option to quit. Because unfortunately, for a lot of us in the room, we don't have an option to quit. The biggest lesson, though, I just want to point that out for me, is really just never ever go into a room with an investor if you don't meet their minimum requirements for investment. You have no idea. So our thesis as Chasing Rainbows is that we only invest in LGBTQ+ founder companies. So one of the founding team members or one of the founding team has to identify as part of the community. And it's a simple yes or no tick box. The amount of people that tick no and still want to book a meeting with us is just outstanding. And so I would also say, don't use LinkedIn automation if you're just looking up investor and sending blanket messages to people either. Oh my God, my inbox is full. So would also appreciate that as well. But ultimately, again, it's just meeting the minimum requirement. So what is it that that investor is looking for? Do you actually meet their requirements? Are they looking for a certain amount of revenue? Are they looking for a certain type of industry expertise or background? And if you don't have it personally, does just someone in your team or even your advisor team have that? And the other thing I would be thinking about as well is just like, how do you compete, as Kelly said, in this market? So why should they back you and not someone with 10 years more experience than you? What is it that you have that gives you that edge on your competition? And I think you really need to be able to tell that story and bring me along on that story as well. But then back it up with data as well. So I think the data piece is so important. And yeah, for me, it's like, the sooner that we can get you to the point that you have a CAC to LTV ratio and that you know what that is, you've got that product and you've got sophistication mapped around that product based on your MVP build, and that you've actually, really been able to understand your customers and your customer journey. And if you are missing revenue opportunities, being able to map those out into that customer journey all goes a long way.
Great perspectives from both of you. Thank you. So Beatrice, you're doing some really cool stuff with entrepreneurs. Let's set aside the mechanics of venture investing for a moment. You spend a lot of time with founders on innovating their sales models and driving growth in other ways. So before they get in the room with that investor, what should they be focused on to command respect when they get in the room?
Respect themselves. And this may sound like a no-brainer, but similar to what you're talking about, ticking those boxes. If you don't go in prepared, you aren't showing that you respect yourself. Personally, I don't want to look at someone who isn't well kept, who isn't clean, who doesn't know their deck. I don't care how much you think you know me, how much you think you're a friend of someone in that room, how much they love your product, how much they already said they may invest, how much they said they would give you 30 minutes, but now they only have 20, how much you think you have it going on. You need to be prepared for 30 minutes, for 20 minutes, for 10 minutes, for 2 minutes. You need to know your deck. You need to be prepared. You need to stand in front of a mirror and watch yourself connect and be able to speak a full sentence to one person before you move to the next person, and hold that eye contact and not say, like, and move around and get all comfortable, and have good body posture and be proud and self-respect. You can be nervous, you can shake, but respect is about projecting it and knowing your deck. I think self-respect is key for getting across that message. I love that idea of respect and being prepared. Know your deck so that it rolls off your tongue and you have practice and it shows. So that you're not saying, like, and filler words. Respect is about preparation.
Love that. Kelly, many of the unique challenges our community faces are invisible. So how do you guide founders to overcome those obstacles and turn them into opportunity when seeking outside capital?
This is such an important question, something that for me is really foundational to success for entrepreneurs in general, is understanding what hurdles are going to be in front of you. Being prepared that there are hurdles that you won't expect that'll be in front of you as part of every entrepreneur's journey. But women, LGBTQ+, BIPOC community members, first generation community members, they have hurdles that are greater than, taller than, stiffer. And so you have to be prepared for them. You have to anticipate what objections funders will have and proactively find ways to differentiate. At the end of the day, venture capital is a pattern matching industry that has two fundamentals. One, the venture capitalists like me have a fiduciary responsibility to net returns for the people who invest in them. And so we are making data-driven decisions, but we're also making people decisions based on what we believe has the potential to return for our fund and for investors. And so as entrepreneurs, it's really important to create the confidence in that venture capitalist. The other element is that venture capitalists, at the end of the day, want the people in front of them to be successful. So they have to believe that they can be successful. I don't want to have 100 meetings to find a portfolio company. I want the meeting I set up to be the one I can believe in. And so if, as you set meetings, you set them with the right people, and you go in prepared to help me believe that you will be that portfolio company. So that means help me understand that you understand that you're likely to raise less capital than a cis heterosexual counterpart is going to raise, because that's the fundamental. And help me understand how your business model is going to build that in, so that I understand that you've built runway in a way that will actually allow you to be able to raise follow-on funding. So those invisible barriers, they're not so invisible, they're real. And for us, as Ben said, we do have to work harder. Accept it. This is something that I was taught growing up, is that I will work harder. Is it fair? Absolutely not. Is it reality? Yes. And as entrepreneurs, it's already a harder path. And so you have to be prepared to take that on, and then choose venture capitalists, choose angels if you have that opportunity, choose partners and team members who will bolster you. So the other side of this is, don't just rely on capital to save the day. Build your support network. As you heard in the earlier panel, build a community of people you can trust and count on.
Thanks, Kelly. Ben, I'm going to pull the thread on something you mentioned a little bit earlier, a little bit further, in talking about sort of unique strengths that you see with LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs, and how would you suggest embracing those strengths in front of investors? Because often, we're guarded, but how would you recommend sort of embracing that and letting that shine through when the founder's in front of an investor?
Thanks for the tough question. I think when I think about it, we are unique, but one thing that I noticed with the LGBTQ+ community often is that we solve for the minorities or the margins. What that means, though, is you actually solve for the majority. And so I like to start thinking about, how can you show that you not only know the community that you're working in, but you also have this wide breadth of knowledge around the everyday person as well, and are able to showcase that your product can do that. And I'll give you an example. So one of the companies that we invested in is a company For Them, which started with a chest binder for individuals who were ab-fab, or assigned female at birth. I learned that term. And so what that binder did was a protective binder, so essentially, and the way that they built it was so that nobody broke ribs, because the founder themselves had broken many ribs. And so thinking about that, and how that binder was for a very small portion of humans in general, I guess you could say, to being picked up by Nike as a sports binder for all individuals in sport, for women in sport in particular. So you can see that how far that founder went from only focusing on the LGBTQ+ community to now being a product that Nike has picked up. And so I think that what they were able to do in particular was they were able to really articulate why this binder made a difference, how it protected individuals, and how it ensured that they were able to move around in everyday life the way that they wanted to. And this is a perfect example of why it was picked up by Nike.
That's great. Beatrice, the startup investor landscape centers around finding new and disruptive business models for scalability. Can you talk a little bit about how you guide founders to think ahead of market trends, and position for opportunity around maybe external disruptors like AI, for instance?
Yes, thank you for the easy question. So this one is a big deal, and I use this, I have for 17 years. And this one is something that I use with all of my clients as a consultant, with all of my clients as a startup advisor. And I can't think of a single one that does it without me. It's free. So there's a company called Future Today Institute, futuretodayinstitute.com. Amy Webb is the CEO, also my client. And she tracks for 17 years, hundreds of sectors. The future of the sector, 5, 10, and 15 years out. And that she's been doing it for 17 years means she's got the history of the sector as well as the trajectory of the sector. And she tracks the optimistic trends coming in the sector, as well as the catastrophic trends coming in this sector, projected as well as optimistic, right? So the pandemic was wildly profitable for some sectors. A lot of businesses went right out of business. Didn't have a plan B, did they? So when I build business plans for clients, what do you think I do? I build their plan to go from here to here and increase revenues inside a cone of uncertainty, leveraging the optimistic trends and creating a plan B for the catastrophic trends. Not rocket science, free. Every year in March, sometimes February, she puts these reports out in hundreds of sectors for free. And they're available to everyone to download. Massive, massive download. Go look, read it. This year's report was 1,000 pages. Took me forever. Not really, I read it all, I'm a nerd. AI, ML, NLP, all over it. Every single sector is founded in AI. You have no other choice but to be involved in AI. You have no choice. If you're not tough, be left behind, not my fault. That's how I do it. I track inside a cone of uncertainty. I target the sectors, will not work with anybody who's in a declining sector, sorry. I'm old enough to know better. And I map for the optimism. Take that revenue, go for the double digits, why not? And create a plan B for the catastrophic trends. That's how.
That's awesome. I'm going to open it up for a couple of questions for all of you to weigh in on. And then if we have time, maybe we'll open it up for the room as well. So if any of you who want to chime in, what are some of the most exciting developments you're seeing in the startup and venture ecosystems that you think our community can benefit from?
Obviously, obviously, but
So yeah, that's exciting, but the unique one for me is DeFi, decentralized finance. That we could get away from centralized banking is, I don't know, as an older woman, that I could get on any bandwagon. I thought legalized marijuana was like, holy shit, in my lifetime, like I'm watching this. My partner has a felony conviction for trimming the leaves off of marijuana. Like, really? Is he ever going to be overturned? Like, can he ever have that expunged? Never mind, sidetrack. That we could have decentralized finance, and that the people who are underbanked, millions of them, can actually, that the LGB, that minority communities can use a banking system privately and securely, that communities all around the world can have access to banking services and funding that they could never otherwise have. That's the cat's meow, if you ask me.
Now you're sitting next to a banker.
Hi, Sally.
Callie, what about you?
As somebody who invests in fintech as one of my verticals, no, I'm going to change gears entirely, and I'm going to talk about the globalization of ideas and collaboration. And so the opportunity for joint partnerships, the opportunity for strategic collaboration across early stage startups, particularly that started to happen during COVID. I think trends like Clubhouse and the X Talks found people who were in academic and entrepreneurial environments, building in isolated places across the world, who are now collaborating together. You have a Silicon Valley ecosystem that is now one of hundreds of startup ecosystems that are taking place across the world. And remote teams and decentralized teams are really creating an opportunity. And for me, I've been dubbed as venture PE, which I thought wasn't a term, but is now a term. Our portfolio is building not just for that multiplying exit on the public market or that unicorn, but our portfolio at 360 Venture Collective is building for the probability that a large portion of our portfolio will exit to corporate acquisition and solving a corporate gap. And so for me, looking at how teams or groups of early stage startups from across the world can come together and solve a problem for a larger enterprise and become part of that kind of global impact solution is a really meaningful trend.
I think for me, it's thinking of how venture capital can be used to fix social problems. And so I feel like we're about to have a big reshuffle in many ways for those that do have access to healthcare, education, and financial inclusion, as mentioned, and those that don't. And I think that those within the communities that often are the ones who are missing out on these or don't have access to these are the ones that are going to solve for it. And when this reshuffle happens, I feel like those ones are going to be the winners because there's going to need to be someone who's already solved for it.
Thank you all. And Beatrice, I was just kidding you earlier. Financial inclusion, I agree completely, is extremely important. So maybe one more question I'll ask, and then we'll see if we have time. Maybe just one word of advice from each of you that we haven't discussed today for the founders in the room who may be preparing for their first or that next capital raise.
Yeah, I'll start with that one. I think like the biggest thing for me is that understand what my responsibilities are as a VC. I think a lot of founders think that VCs are just banks. And that they can just go and raise capital without really understanding that what my responsibilities are. So my fiduciary responsibilities are to return a multiple, not just the cash back that I get from an investor or an LP, but actually multiples on that capital. So every single time you go to an investor for a meeting and go for funding, you have to be able to articulate not only that you will be able to return the capital, but you'll be able to return it on a multiple. And the goal essentially is 100x, 1000x. That's the big goal, right? And so when I think about the funds and the companies that we invest in, I have to think about, does this company have $1 billion valuation potential or even multi-billion dollar or even more, right? Because in order to be able to actually give my investors what they need, I need to be able to invest in a company that will. And so I think the biggest advice I can give is before you go into that room, understand if venture is the right pathway for you. Because ultimately, I don't think venture is the pathway for everybody. And I think you really have to understand that. So what are the alternatives? Obviously, there is grants, and grants are a great way to sort of get your business off the ground from the beginning. And then focus on debt financing. Because to be honest, if you can own 100% of your business and it's earning $10 million a year with $2 million of outlay, you're winning in my books. You're doing much better than I am, trust me. So versus somebody who has to, raise multiple rounds of venture in order to be able to get that $1 billion valuation and, lose quite a lot of control of the company at the same time. But so I just want to make sure that everyone understands that.
Bravo.
I think that was a really outstanding answer. Really understanding the cost of capital is my first prerequisite to having a conversation with a team. Understand the cost of capital, then understand the purpose for the capital. What material milestone will that capital allow you to take? How does it allow you to step ahead of your action that you would take if you didn't have that capital in hand? What competitive advantage does it give you? What does it allow you to test? How does it allow you to differentiate? And is it worth the cost of that early stage capital? The other piece we've mentioned, and I can't emphasize it enough, is your time is incredibly valuable. And so make sure that you're setting an intention list, just as you would if you were searching for an employer, of who you want to meet. The investors that you invite on the journey with you have the potential to really open doors. We say fair funding and an unfair advantage at our firm. But they also have the ability to limit your opportunity. They have the ability to set the bar too high on the valuation, which may impact your future funding round. So really be thoughtful about who you want to bring along the journey. Don't think exclusively about the scarcity of capital. If you are going after capital, choose the right capital, because not every dollar counts the same.
That's a good one. I'm going to add that paying attention to how your clients want to buy is infinitely more important than how you want to sell your product. So Blockbuster didn't go out of business because people stopped watching movies. Netflix paid attention to how people wanted to buy them. Put it in my mailbox. Put it on my computer later. Taxis didn't have a challenge because Uber took business away from them. Uber paid attention to how people wanted to hail a cab. Just give me an app. Don't make me carry cash. So when you have a product and you decide how you want to sell it, ask your clients how they want to buy it and then adjust to that, because how they want to buy it is infinitely more important than how you want to sell it. That's what I want to add.
Lots of great advice here. Do we have time for a couple of questions? So let's open it up to the room. Any questions?
Did I mention an app? Oh, futuretodayinstitute.com. futuretodayinstitute.com. Actually, it might be fti.com, but you can find it under futuretodayinstitute.com. Her name is Amy Webb. She's the CEO. She has a podcast. Anything Amy Webb puts in writing, you read. Her entire team fact checks everything. She speaks all over the world. Governments hire her. She advises Apple. futuretodayinstitute.com. Everything she says is beyond reproach.
Hi, thank you for today. My name is Daniel Seneca. I'm an advertising strategist. Three-part question here. As funders, are you seeing startups come to you that are centering diversity, equity, inclusion? Second part, is it part of their business fundamentals? Does it affect them one way or another? And then third, if they are including that, how do you suggest they talk about that, incorporate it into their pitch? Thanks.
Is from a business perspective or from a internal team perspective?
From a business perspective.
Right.
I'll take a crack at it. So part one, yes, we are seeing startups that come to us centering on diversity as a thematic choice. Two, we have to look at total attainable market. And so if you're focusing on addressing an under-addressed problem, and there is a market differentiator, and there are a lot of products that do this well, particularly around the CPG and healthcare initiatives in the femtech category, all historically under-addressed categories where I would say the diversity of the founding team and the perspective of the founding team deeply impact the opportunity and the connection to the problem. And then three, I think exactly what Beatrice said earlier about building resilience in the business model and thinking about how does this also support adjacent market adoption. And so thinking about product adjacency, thinking about where is the consumer appetite, what is the risk to go to market in centering on that diversity piece. And I think that in today's climate, with the number of litigious and strategic actions being taken against diversity, it's important to think about that risk cone is slightly broader than it was historically, and think about the opportunity around that. And so I think the response Ben gave earlier about the product for binding and being able to think about mass adoption, it doesn't take away from the opportunity to serve the original audience it expands the opportunity for production and the research and opportunity to support that audience. And I think that's the perfect example.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, Beatrice. I love your blazer. Nice to meet you. My name's Hillary Lear. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Quiller, which is generative AI for political campaigns. My question for you is about valuations. So I raised our pre-seed last year. I'm raising a seed round now. Valuations for early stage companies are a little less clear than a 10x on revenue for a Series A. What advice do you have for founders of early stage companies on how they approach investors around valuation? All three of you, ideally.
I mean, like, to be honest, I'm sitting on the other side of the fence. I will say that valuations are very fair at the moment. So we're investing anywhere from like 3 to 8 for a pre-seed, 8 to 15 for a seed, and 15 to 25, I guess, for an A. So compared to what they were, investors aren't really competing the same way. I'm of the ilk right now. I'm deploying as much capital as we possibly can because valuations are good from an investor standpoint. But realistically, I think I would just, look at the average, see what's around. Like if you're going into like an accelerator, obviously like Techstars or things like that, they make you take a 3 mil valuation cap, unless of course you've got 250K of committed capital. So I'd be looking at some of that. 5's pretty standard. I wouldn't really push it too far up from that. If you, it really depends again, if you've got product, if you've got customers, if you've got revenue, all those sort of things do play. But yeah, I think the smallest cap size we've signed, I think, is a 2 mil val cap. So yeah, but that also, I'm going to point this out, those founders, unfortunately, other investors took advantage of them because I would not have put their valuation so low. I said that to them, but in order for us not to disadvantage our LPs, we had to match that. And it kind of sucked. But now they're at 7x, which is great. And revenue generating and cash flow positive. So, hey, I'm winning over here.
And if you have other questions, we're about 5 minutes away from a coffee break. And I believe all 4 of our panelists, or 3 panelists and moderator, will be there at the coffee break as well, too. So please, if you could give a round of applause to David, Ben, Beatrice, and Kelly.